Hi everyone, my name's Eden and thank you for joining us at the Power and Courage podcast. Today we have a very special guest on and a good friend of mine, Rachel Mackenzie. Rachel Mackenzie is the National Director of Rachel's Vineyard in the UK. She's spent many years supporting men and women affected by the trauma of abortion, and she's also made quite a few media appearances, including going on the BBC with Anne Robinson. And this morning I was kind of thinking about ways that I could describe Rachel. And I think the phrase that perfectly sums her up and embodies her and her ethic, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel, but she is the embodiment of love them both. She really is an example of how the pro-life movement can and should love both the unborn child and their parents. And this is reflected in all the work that she's done throughout the years in this sphere. So thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Eden, for asking me.
Thank you. I'm going to get straight in. For people who haven't heard your story, would you be able to tell us a little bit about that and your background?
Okay, yes. So I am post-abortive. That means I've had abortions myself. And like every abortion story, a lot of people think when maybe they don't know many people who've had abortions or they're not so well read up on this subject, but everybody's abortion story doesn't start the day you get pregnant, but there's always a backstory. There's always a story that set you up to make a really bad decision. Now, that doesn't mean that I own what I do, because I do. I completely will take my own blame pie, as I call it. But there are other blame pies that belong to other people that led me to make a decision to have an abortion, to end the lives of my children. And so my own abortion story started when I was 3. My mum and dad split up. My dad was mentally ill. My dad had got schizophrenia, and I went to live with him and his family. And my dad's quite innocent in this because my dad was fighting his own demons, but everybody else in the family were very cruel. And I was subjected to every single type of abuse that was physical, emotional, spiritual, psychological, and sexual abuse. And when I think about the sexual abuse alone, I was abused by my uncles. They were even having sex with each other. It was very dysfunctional and dark family. So I was abused by them. I was abused by other family members. And when I was 15, I was raped by what I thought was my boyfriend. Obviously, he was a man that was grooming me, that was just had a kick in and was really into virgins. And so I was raped at 15. I went on to university and I was sexually assaulted in the theology department of all places in the library. And then I was assaulted by a gynecologist in hospital. And you begin to think, my gosh, either, well, that's some fabricated story, or you must have had something written on your head, like, unlucky. And I actually did. And the word that I had that was around me was vulnerable. So I was a very vulnerable person that people could very easily take advantage of. And when I think about the sexual abuse alone, that wasn't the worst abuse for me, Eden. The worst abuse was the neglect, because it's the neglect that bled into every area of my life. And I always say to people, if you don't heal from what hurt us, we'll bleed on people that never cut us. And so to survive this way of my childhood that was just so dysfunctional, so abusive, you either, psychiatrists and psychologists say, you either become a people pleaser, invisible, or, outrageously fighting, for your rights. And I became a people pleaser, but nobody's life is as black and white as that. And they say that, you can fight, flight, freeze or fawn in situations. So the majority of the time I fawned, I was a people pleaser, but at times I was a fighter as well. And when I remember I was at university, I even froze in that situation. And so when it became, my life just became this spiral out of control. I had this really human, most significant need, which was to be loved. And if I couldn't get love from my family, which I certainly couldn't, then I'd look in the other places. And so I'd go out with men. All I ever wanted was my once upon a time with my happy ever after. I just wanted to be married. I just wanted a husband. And so I just thought, well, I need to just fight really hard to be loved and to work harder, because obviously love just didn't come my way. So I became pregnant for the first time while I was still at school. And I just wanted to be unpregnant. I just wanted the pregnancy to just go away. I didn't want to be a mother, Eden. And I thought, this will solve my problem. So the first thing I did was I buried my head in the sand and just hoped it would go away. And I purposely used that word unpregnant, because even though I was 17, 18, I had the emotional age of probably a 7 or 8 year old. I was emotionally stunted. And the problem wouldn't go away. So I went to a family planning centre of all places, and I was asked one question: will this affect your mental health? And I knew to say yes. I didn't even know what that question meant. It's a very loaded question. And I know, the majority of abortions is done for that reason, for mental health. But when you're asked a question, you just need to say yes to. And that's all the evidence they need to gather. I was just another number to them. And so I had my first abortion. I realise now I was in a maternity ward of all places, where, all the doctors and the midwives were bringing life into the world. And there I was with the abortionist killing the life of my first child. I didn't realise that or recognise that. I did to some degree, but the overpowering, all-consuming fear and my lack of love for myself, how on earth was I going to love my child? And, so I had the first abortion, didn't want to be a mom, and immediately was relieved. I think there's like two sets of different people, how they react to mothers, but I maybe ask me about that after, but I was just relieved. My problem had gone away. I wasn't a mum. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so I was pregnant for the second time. And I say I think, because between the first and the second, and even after the second abortion, I was taking an awful lot of morning after pills. And I know they're abortive, so I've no idea how many children I've lost that way. And so my second abortion, I went to an abortion centre. I don't call it a clinic, because in a clinic you feel better. I never felt better again. And I had my second abortion, and I was awake for this one. And I was awake. So I know Abby Johnson, those who know the woman that was portrayed in the film Unplanned, she talks about abortion has a smell. And I can clarify, she's right. It does have a smell, and it does have a sound. I know what it sounds like. I know what it feels like. The way I can describe it is white light. I know what it looks like, because I watched the abortionist count the body parts of my baby to ensure, how ironic is this, to ensure that my life would be saved, that there wasn't a part of my baby left inside of me that would maybe have infected and killed me. Oh, the irony. There we were, killing my second child, killing Jude, and, and all we were bothered about is how I was. And how did I feel? Relieved. My problem had gone away, but it hadn't. Maybe later I'll talk about, the signs and symptoms, what abortion trauma looks like, and how that impacts on a lot of women and men, because it affects men too. But I think I'll just end my story by saying, I eventually found a place called Rachel's Vineyard, and it was at Rachel's Vineyard. There's always one, Eden, and of course I was going to be that one, that doesn't acknowledge so much the child. So I went to Rachel's Vineyard, grieving the children that could have been, that might have been, not the children that were. And while I was there, going through the different activities, we're doing some work on anger. And I just said, well, everyone was crying. I said I wasn't crying, because I didn't realise at the time I was disassociating. And I just said, well, I couldn't have children. I couldn't be a mum after the second abortion. And the priest there changed my life forever. And he just said, Rachel, it's not that you couldn't be a mum, you are a mum. And that realisation, that bolt that just blew my heart up, and just made me feel whole for the first time in many, many years. You see, I had abortions because I didn't want to be a mum, but abortions didn't solve that problem. It just made me a mum to my dead children, that are now alive in heaven, that love me. Jude and Paul, I know, pray for me. Can't wait to see them again, because that's the gift of Rachel's Vineyard, and that's the gift from God, the scandalous mercy that he always handed back to me. Hope, hold on, pain ends.
Thank you so much. Every time I hear you tell your story, I just I can't. It's very sad. I think we'll go back to kind of the trauma later, but just following on from what you said last, can you tell us a little bit about Rachel's Vineyard and how you became to get involved with it from more of a, like, well, somebody who's organizing it, somebody who's running it perspective, and what can people kind of expect, and how can people tell other people about Rachel's Vineyard?
Okay, so Rachel's Vineyard wasn't named after me. I didn't start it. So Rachel comes from Jeremiah in the Bible, mourning her children because the children are no more. And so Rachel's Vineyard is a weekend retreat. It's a place away from the world where people can safely and honour their children and grieve, because we're all grieving. And so the people that come, it is a Christian retreat with Catholic aspects, but you can come if you're a Sikh, a Muslim, an atheist, agnostic. Everybody's welcome at Rachel's Vineyard, because abortion tears are abortion tears. But I just, always sort of warn people, this is a Christian retreat. You are going to hear about Jesus. You are going to hear, the Bible readings. So it's an intense weekend because grief is intense. Starts on a Friday and it ends on a Sunday. And we go through what's called living scriptures. So we have a Bible reading. An example of one we don't use, I think really sums up what we do, is they'll listen to the story of Jesus down on the cross. Then they're at the foot of the cross in the meditation, listen to what Jesus says. And when they open their eyes, I might say something like, imagine there's a Sarah there. And I'll go, Sarah, when Jesus said, forgive Sarah because she didn't know what she was doing. Did you know what you were doing the day of the abortion? And so we do lots of living scriptures like this where we can react to them in light of our abortion story. We get to share our abortion story. And the group begins to realise that they were called on that retreat. You see, when God plays chess, everybody wins. And so, and then everybody that's there have got very similar stories where they can relate to each other. So it's only a quick 15 minutes, not the highlights, but the lowlights of our story and our life. And then we do some anger work as part of grief. And we're moving towards the end of the retreat where we have a memorial, because the majority of abortions, there's no body to bury. So we have a beautiful memorial where we get to honour our children and get to honour who we are. And I say get to honour who we are because Rachel's Vineyard is not just for mothers. It's for fathers, grandparents, siblings, cousins, and even abortion workers, because we're all falling for the same lie that this is the best we can do for society and for our children. So everybody's welcome on a retreat. We're very well known probably for that weekend, but we meet up 6 weeks later, what's called the upper room, where we meet again. I did one this weekend where we just come together as our little family that we've bonded over the weekend. You see, Eden, nobody wants to come on the Friday, but nobody wants to leave on the Sunday. And so we have a WhatsApp group and we all join together and see where people are at and how we can signpost people to other organisations and support. And then I'll either have weekly or fortnightly or monthly Zooms for those that need it. We support people on their journey of faith. We do Alpha, Rachel's Vineyard Alpha, once a year, where anybody that's been on a Rachel's Vineyard can join us. We usually have about 35 people that do that. Wow. We sponsor people to go to other events like Big Church, Youth 2000, and just support people whenever they need it. Some people I've supported for quite a few years and others jump in and out of my life. And strangely, I mean, this is like sort of the family of Rachel's Vineyard. I've been invited to 4 weddings this year and they're all Rachel's Vineyard women.
Wow.
So we stay in touch for as long as people need us. So yeah, we even, strangely, I don't know how only God could do this, we get involved with crisis pregnancies. So women will ring us either because they want to book a Rachel's Vineyard because they're still pregnant, or they've had an abortion and they're going to repeat it, and they know maybe if I speak to Rachel she'll understand, and I can then send them to great organisations like Good Counsel Network and 40 Days and get them the support that they need.
That's amazing. It sounds like very much you're a big family, the Rachel's Vineyard family, and you're kind of the mum of it in a way.
Yeah. It's such a privileged role, Eden. I'm so privileged to do what I do. I get to see the miracles that everyday people don't get to see.
I can imagine. And so when a woman or a man or anyone comes to Rachel's Vineyard, what kind of things might they be experiencing?
So the first thing we do when they contact me is we have a Zoom and we see where people are at, because if they've just had the abortion, then it's so raw, it's so brutal, the grief for some. You see, when remember I told you that I was in that camp of women that had the abortion, was relieved. So I was in denial. But for some, they don't get to be in denial. They go straight to, oh my gosh, what have I done? Because they see the reality because of pills by post at home, or immediately that fear is removed and they're like, what have I done? What on earth have I done? How is this the best decision? So when women and men contact me and they're in that trauma of those first 6 months, I just journey with people. It's too raw to come to Rachel's Vineyard. And I don't just, even though I'm Rachel's Vineyard through and through, I know some people might need psychotherapy first, or actually need like a 12-step healing program where it's just weekly, gently, with amazing groups like Stillwater and Image or ARSH, Abortion Recovery Care Helpline. Those are the only ones I really mention. They're the safe ones that I know about. And so I journey with them. And one of the things that really helps them in that Zoom is when I say to them, you're grieving. And like the shoulders sort of go, because nobody's ever told them. On the day of the abortion, they didn't lose something. They lost someone. And being able to say to them, you're grieving, and because you're a good mom, because you're a good dad, because that's the last thing they feel like. That's why you're grieving. That's why you're hurting. And they are allowed to grieve. Teresa Burke, that started Rachel's Vineyard, she wrote a book called Forbidden Grief, because we think we're not allowed to grieve because we did it. We played a part in this. And so this is how, the devil, I call him Little Red Legs, this is how he gets in. So you get a camp of people that have just had the abortion, or then it becomes the other end of it, where they're in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s, that will contact me decades after their abortion experience. We've had 80-year-olds on the retreat and they've just carried this wound for so long. And so when you said, well, how does it come out? Well, some people don't believe there's such a thing as abortion trauma. Well, then, if you don't believe in that, then you don't believe in car crash trauma, you don't believe in rape trauma, because what we're basically saying is it's PTSD. It's post-traumatic stress disorder. And and how do I know this? Because of the symptoms they're displaying to me and telling me about. So this can be, low self-esteem, self-hatred, self-harm. And it won't be just a fact of like beating themselves or cutting themselves. It's the way they will look in the mirror and call themselves names and starve themselves, eating disorders. That's how Rachel's Vineyard started, was a group of women who'd got bulimia and anorexia. When I think about bulimia, I was bulimic, filling yourself to empty yourself, filling yourself to empty yourself, reenacting the abortion experience. And one woman said, I was never hungry when I binged. I ate because I was full of anger, full of sadness, full of loneliness. And I would empty myself to empty those feelings. And then nightmares. Oh my gosh, the nightmares that women tell me about. One that is very common is women running around a house and shouting for their child. They can hear crying, but they don't know where it's coming from, and they can never find the child in the house. And I think the one that always gets to me, Eden, is one woman told me how she went in her dream, and it was like a recurrent dream. She had a shopping basket and she'd fill it up with nappies and dummies and baby clothes. And every time she got to the till, it'd be empty. And she'd wake up. The infertility, where their womb becomes a tomb, drug and alcohol abuse, promiscuous behaviour, fascination with children and birth, creating a phantom child. I had a whole nursery with a crib, clothes, everything. I used to go around mother care buying clothes. I hadn't got a child. you know, so these are like the impact of what, and I didn't even know I was grieving. I just thought I like baby clothes. It wasn't until I come to Rachel's Vineyard and all this list is read out that we're all like, oh my gosh, this is actually abortion grief that I'm dealing with.
Gosh. I guess, I think for the time that I've been doing pro-life work, you see a lot of people in the pro-life movement who will kind of deny this, and they'll say that, you know, they'll be extremely unkind and rude towards post-abortive men and women, and they'll say that, you know, you aren't allowed to grieve. I think that does come from both sides of the pro-abortion and anti-abortion stance sometimes. And so, you know, how can we respond to people who say stuff like this and don't actually recognize that people who've had, like women who've had abortions and parents who've had abortions, are allowed to grieve?
Yeah, I think it comes from a lack of a formation of our hearts. You know, when it says, you know, take away, you know, ask God, take away that heart of stone and give me a heart of flesh. And I think I think it's done through anger as well, you know, and this righteous anger, because it's so wrong that we're killing our children, that they're blinded by what is really the truth of abortion, that there's more than one victim in this. And I think if you're not aware of it, I mean, one of the lines that frustrates the life out of me is women, you know, when they have multiple abortions, well, you know, they're using it as a form of contraception. And I think that really shows the depth of the ignorance of people that say that. You know, when people have repeated abortions, I know people that have had, you know, from 2 to 15. And I know people at Rachel's Vineyard, other groups, talk about 30. And this is not used as a form of contraception. It's actually a sign of significant trauma when we repeat it. And we repeat anything to try and make sense of it. You know, I was raped at 15 and I repeated that experience myself many, many times with many men, trying to make sense of it. You know, I was talking to a woman recently, one of the most beautiful hearted women I've ever spoken to, who'd had multiple abortions. She'd never said the name or the number of the abortions because of the layer of shame that she already feels, let alone when she finds out what some, you know, others think of her. This is what she thinks of herself. And she purposely got pregnant every single time, hoping that this time she wouldn't end the life of a child. I mean, can you imagine that? Like, I'm pregnant again, I can do it. And the same happens again. If nothing changes, nothing changes. You know, I mean, I know that I converted by the line that my mum said to me, why'd you do the same thing and expect a different result? It's Einstein's theory of insanity. And that's what it is. It's repeated trauma. And so, you know, and then I don't care what people call me. And for me personally, it's pro-lifers that attack me every time. And, you know, they'll call me, they'll say, I'm not going to heaven. My children, the one I had recently was my children aren't in heaven. And, you know, I deserve, you know, to die a really bad death. I'm going to hell. Geez, this is the unforgivable sin. And it's tragic because they're actually sending themselves to hell by coming out with things like this, because God's going to judge them the way they judge others. But I don't care what people say to me, Eden, because I know that I stand on, you know, the word of God. But what I do care is people that haven't had any healing already think this, and therefore don't think there's any healing for them, think that they've, you know, they're there, that there's no hope, there's only despair. And that's what's so frustrating. And I believe that one of the most significant voices in the pro-life movement is the post-abortive woman and man.
Absolutely.
Because we can say how it really is. And what's when people, you know, I might occasionally get, you know, a pro-abort turn around and say, well, it's all right for you because you've had your abortions. You know, well, it wasn't all right that I killed my children. It'll never be okay. You know, and yes, God has, you know, used something so horrific and turned it into good. It wasn't God's will and it wasn't his plan. So, yeah, I think people need to change their hearts. How can they do it? If they go on March for Life website, go to the media section and go to the testimonies and listen to all the women and men. Listen to Theo and Anhil and Pio, the dads that lost their children. Listen to Amy and Natanya and Natalia and Kirsty and many others, you know, talk about their abortion experience and what it did to them. This hurts women deeply. This hurts men. This hurts the abortion industry even. You know, I was talking to a woman at a train station recently, talk about how God plans things, you know, and we just got chatting and I said, oh, what do you do? Or got to talk about work. I said, what do you do for a living? I work for Mary Stopes.
Oh.
Yeah, and I went, do you? I said, I work in the abortion industry too. She said, oh, wow, she'd not many people. I said, yeah, I support those and help them after they've been to your you know, centre. And I'm now journeying with her. I'm now journeying with her journey, you know. And I remember her saying to me, you know, I had abortions myself, you know, because of A, B, and C. Gave me these reasons. And I went, you didn't. You had abortions because you had a terrible childhood. And she went, you know, and I just got on the train with her, you know, and this is the beginning of her journey. And, you know, that this impacts everybody. And whether they know it or they don't, they're in the first stage of denial. But, you know, these hurtful comments on social media, the way you know, you never know who you're speaking to. You never know who you're talking to who could be post-abortive.
Yes.
You know, and I think, you know, I was recently at a wedding and somebody was talking about abortion and they knew I was part of Rachel's Vineyard, but they didn't know I was post-abortive. You know, and out came the word murderer, you know, and I, you know, and I turned around, I said, well, I know I'm not a murderer. I know I kill my children, but I'm not a murderer. And they wanted to die because it never dawned on them that maybe, you know, that I was, and I felt sort of bad for them that they felt so bad. But I thought, well, I've got to say something. I can't just let that go.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that I kind of put emphasis on with people as well, is just like be mindful because you don't know who you're speaking to. Like using words like murder and, you know, derogatory words to describe women, it's just a no-no, like straight up no-no.
And I know, like for my mum, I remember like years ago, my mum said to me, yeah, why can't you say the word murder? Because she didn't know what the difference is between murder and kill. It's the same thing. And I did break the commandment, thou shalt not kill. I know I did. But the difference is, first of all, sadly in this country, it's not illegal. So if it's not illegal, it can't be murder. Now, if it was, even if it was legal, when you think of like, you know, you've had children yourself, Eden, and where your brain can go when you've had a child, that people can be quite traumatized by a birth or suffer from postnatal depression, and how women, you know, have in that experience have killed their children. Now, we do need justice, absolutely. But when that's gone to court, these women are never had for murder. They're had for manslaughter.
Yes.
You know, because it's diminished responsibility. And that's exactly the same for these women and the men that choose abortion. It's diminished responsibility. None of these women and men that come to Rachel's Vineyard would ever have got a child in a crib and kill them. So but somehow, you know, this is sold as, you know, this is a woman's right. This is, you know, your body autonomy and all this rubbish. The lies were sold. And then the fear, you know, that comes over us. This is why women, and then the backstory. It's always the backstory. You know, the woman that rang me who had multiple abortions, if people could hear her backstory, you would actually go, of course she did that. Of course that's where it took her. You know, was it right? Absolutely no, it wasn't right. You know, it didn't help her, and it certainly didn't help her children.
Yeah, it's so true. I saw something on Twitter X the other day, and it was a video of, it must have been in America, there was a woman on there and she was screaming, I've had 45 abortions and I'm okay, and I love abortions and God loves abortions. And it was shared by, I think, like a page that was anti-abortion. And they were like, oh, you still think that no one chooses to have abortions? And I was kind of like, they don't understand that this woman is very, very clearly in a trauma loop. And so you're attacking her and harassing her, and this video is going viral amongst the anti-abortion community. But can you not see past what she's actually saying, and that angry people are hurting people? And I said something like that on X, and everyone was like, oh, you know, you sympathize with a murderer, that kind of stuff, you know, just went on to attacking me. But you know, from your perspective, a woman who's been screaming like, I've had 45 abortions, I love abortions, would that be her in a trauma loop?
I 100% agree it is, you know, and I think, like you said, wounded people wound, You know, if we don't heal from what hurt us, we'll bleed on people that never cut us. And, you know, and that whether we like it or not, for some people, it has become, well, it is demonic, but for some people, it's become that demonic loop as well. And that's all they can see. My heart goes out to these women and men. I think, how on earth are they ever going to get healing? Because they're stuck in denial. And this woman that says she's had 40 odd abortions, well, I would wonder if that number's true.
Yes.
You know, but secondly, ask her in 20 years' time if she feels the same way, because I'm dealing with, you know, 50, 60-year-olds. I think one of my retreats this year in February, there was 2 20-year-olds and the rest was over 60. Everybody was.
Wow.
You know, and God sort of does that with age groups. And they are only coming now because they're only beginning to now realise what they've done. I think very often our eyes are open, the scales are removed when we have a conversion. And what is the use of that woman coming out of denial if she hasn't got a scaffolding of people around her to support her, to her healing? You know, I always say, I needed to know that I was loved before I was willing to look at my abortion. Before I was even willing to look at it, I needed to know that I was loved just as I am. You know, you think of that, you know, I know on Twitter X, I'm prodigal daughter. And that nickname that I give myself is because when I think of the prodigal son and Jesus, you know, when God the Father ran out, I don't think the son moved. I think God ran out to him. He met him where he was, just where he was, and embraced him just where he was, loved him just where he was. And yes, then we move forward into the Father's house. We don't stay there, but that's where, and if we don't meet people in love and truth where they are, you know, and people go, well, why isn't she converted? And God will be calling on these people and saying, well, sent him you. And what did you do? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. You do. I think you have to meet people where they are and bring them on the journey, which obviously you're a shining example of. And I'm trying to do the same thing. But I did find that I don't know if you remember the Manchester kind of, I call it the Manchester pro-abortion mob that happened when the Manchester Students for Life tried to have their event, and there was just that whole outrage, and there were loads of pro-abortion people in the streets protesting and screaming at them and all these terrible things. And I remember afterwards, Abortion Resistance shared a clip of it, and we had our page literally flooded with the people who were at the mob, some of them. And anyway, I started messaging them privately, each one. And turned out most of them were post-abortive. Most of them had a best friend who had had an abortion, and they were really there to stand up for their friends, or to kind of say, justify their decision to have an abortion. And so it kind of, I spoke to a lot of them, and we came to some common ground, and we ended up, having really cordial conversations, despite the fact their behavior was absolutely horrendous at the actual, at the protest. And I think this is something people don't, think about enough, is that if you can meet somewhere there, and even like just to kind of help them dispel their anger and say, look, we don't hate you. We're not trying to tell you that, you're a terrible person. We're here because we actually care about you and care about unborn lives. It kind of softens them, but then also, they're there because they are doing it out of compassion, and it's like a false compassion, but it's still like their intentions are good, even if their behavior is bad or their actions are bad and unjustifiable. They're not there because they hate us. They're there because they hate abortion and need to justify that to themselves. Does that make sense? It's kind of compassion rather than a hatred.
Absolutely. And Eden, I can't thank you enough that you took the time to speak to them individually, because all we're called to do, I know, like people said, this war of this fight of abortion seems to be like, my gosh, it seems to be getting bigger and we're not winning it. But all I know is God's just going to ask me when I die, was I in the battle? Was I in the battle? And did I try and do my part? And gosh, Eden, the part that you're playing, you're on the front line there, and picking them out individually, and you're planting the seed, and you'll never know the good. I mean, occasionally, do you know what? God will allow you a glimpse into the work that you're doing now. And I know this because he's done it with me. I had a post-abortive woman contact me, and we're having a Zoom, and she said, she was fine with an abortion experience, but then this woman came and gave a talk at this event, and when she started describing it, and I just said, and I told her the name of the event, she went, yeah, should you know it? I said, yeah, it was me that was talking. And with my pink hair, you'd have thought she might have noticed it was me. And she said, it's when she stood up and just said she killed her children. I thought, my gosh, that's what I've done. That's what I've done. And, but it was because I never point the finger at them. I'm not there with, with a banner saying, you've killed your children, but that compassion that I gave myself in front of these people, it brought her to Rachel's Vineyard.
Yes.
And I remember speaking to Isabel Vaughan Spruce, one of the co-directors, March for Life, and she said, and we're saying to her, how do we change the hearts of these, pro-aborts? And she said, you've got to pray for their conversion first. And lo and behold, the next retreat I ran, the whole retreat, there's always a theme on a retreat, whether it's, sadly rape, where 7 of the 9 have been raped. And that 7 that were raped, they didn't get pregnant. They reenacted it through an abortion experience years later. Mm. And the majority of the team had been raped on that retreat. And then the next retreat will all be about their mother wounds, where the mothers actually took them for the abortions, or the mothers were just so abusive to them. That's the only model of mother they'd ever seen. Mm. So there's always sort of a theme. And after these words from Isabel, the next retreat, the theme was conversions. It was incredible.
Wow.
How people had absolutely fine with their abortion, not a problem. Then they converted, and then they're like, what have I done?
Wow.
Realization,
And is that theme set, or is that just...
No, God sets it. It'll just happen. So once I get, like, the next retreat I'm running, I've got 6 mums, 2 aunties, a dad, and a priest that's going to come and participate as well, because everybody on the team has to participate, whether or not you've had an abortion. And if you've had an abortion, then you have to retreat twice to ensure that we're supporting people, without being broken ourselves. Mm. And when I read up then, and I think about their stories, I suddenly see there's a link, between all their stories. And we had a retreat all on addiction, where there was, addicts from drugs to alcohol to porn to shopping to food. And so it just evolves when God does it. We'll have a group where everybody's from, I'll have like Polish and Mexican and Black African. We have 2 Black Africans on one retreat. And there's like, as you know, there's like many, many dialects, hundreds and hundreds of dialects in Africa, and they could speak the same dialect.
Wow.
So this is what God does when he puts, that's why I don't care if somebody cancels or somebody jumps on the right people, because God's playing chess and he's sorting out who's going to be there.
That's amazing. I guess I have a question that, it's been something that I've thought about for a long time, and I wonder your thoughts on it. What, if abortion became illegal, do you think women who sought illegal abortions should be punished? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, 2 parts to that. The first part is people often go, if abortion was illegal tomorrow, then people are going to have backstreet abortions. Well, we're already there. We're already at backstreet abortions, because when abortion came in, the abortions that were happening there weren't a coat hanger, as people have all these pictures of. It was basically pills by post. And that's what we've already got today, So will people still have abortions illegally? Yes, they will. Of course they will. But I know for me and for many others that I remember Isabel once saying, would 40 days, the ones that pray outside abortion centres and give women real choices, would that have made a difference to me? No, it wouldn't have. I was like that and knew what I was doing. But the one thing that would have stopped my abortion was if it was illegal, because I wouldn't have done something illegal. I was like fearful of the law, So, do we need the law? If it was illegal, do we need there to be a law there? That people are going to be what's the word I'm looking for? Convicted in one way or another. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And we need it for women's protection, not just at the children that they're killing. We need it to protect women, because when women already, these pills by post, and having it up until 10 weeks, but actually women having it after. When I think about women that are being in the sex trade, or women that are being raped by their fathers, this is actually when you're actually now, what did the child do? It doesn't unrape them. It doesn't make the wound go away. But what you're doing is putting them back into that same scenario for it to happen again and again and again. You've actually, in many respects, killed the evidence, and the only beauty in all of this would have been their child. Yes. But people can't see that. So I think we do need, if it was illegal, we do need there to be a law against it, because we need to protect women and we need to protect the children.
Yes. So if that law were to come into place, what would the punishment, I guess, look like?
Well, I suppose the law we've got at the moment, her name's gone out of my head, but that woman, that had the abortion pills.
Carla Foster?
Yeah, poor Carla Foster. I hope one day to meet that poor woman. She's already in a prison before they put her in a prison, because she will never, ever get that image out of her head. This law was there to protect Carla as well as her child. What did it do to her? We need the law in place, and we need good judges to look at it we need justice with love and with truth, and look at the mitigating circumstances. What led her to do this? But do we need the law in place? Yes, we do. What does that law look like? Where should she be? Well, I'll leave that for the judge to decide, because they're the experts in this, But I just pray, in prison or not, this was horrific what happened to her, and she needs support and help. It doesn't matter for me personally whether she's in prison or not. I know she's already in a prison, because I was in the same prison.
Yeah. And so for anyone who's listening who might be post-abortive and, experiencing some of the things that you've mentioned in our conversation, what would your message to them be?
My message would be, you're not alone. You're not alone, and we're here to support you. We don't judge anybody. I think you can pick up on that, what I've talked about. We're not here to condemn you. We just want to journey with you and help you get well, because you deserve that. You deserve that as a mother, to get well again. And we just want to support people where they're at and move on and journey with them. It's also worth, that not just the mothers, fathers, the grandparents, anybody that's affected by abortion, or friends. Not only did I have my abortions, Eden, I took my friends for abortions. So there was a pain and a grief around that, where I've done to some of my friends, or not fought for them. I'm thinking of 3 friends at university, and I just high-fived near enough their decision by keeping my mouth shut. So just reach out. We're here for you. And we're here in truth and love. And even if you haven't got a weekend free, we can journey with in many different ways to support you along your grief journey. And there is hope. Hold on, pain ends. It does get better.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Honestly, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I hope people who are listening can get something from it. We are supposed to, at the beginning of the podcast, I'm supposed to ask you a light-hearted question. But today I had so much that I was thinking about, but I didn't even ask you it. So I guess I'll end this podcast with a light-hearted question. And my light-hearted question for you would be, who is your favourite Disney princess?
My favourite what?
Disney princess.
Disney princess. I hate Disney. I absolutely hate Disney and what they've done. So my princess in my life is going to be Mother Mary. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Well, that's a great answer. So could you, if people want to get in touch with you, I guess you can find Rachel on rachelsvineyard.org.uk. And I know that Rachel's Vineyard isn't exclusive to the UK. They do have, I guess, not centres, but groups around the world, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah. They've got a few in Ireland. They're all over the world. I think it's over 80 countries now, or 90.
Wow.
So if people want to, if they're from a different country, if you go just to rachelsvineyard.org, it names and lists all the countries and where they're at. You know, so yeah, it's all over. It's incredible where it's gone.
Wow.
Work. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And to anyone listening, please do follow Abortion Resistance on all social media platforms. Our @ is Abortion Resist, and you can subscribe to our mailing list through our website, abortionresistance.org.uk, and where you can find other podcast episodes and also some handy blogs and ways that you can get more involved in the pro-life movement. So thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us today, and hopefully we'll get you back on soon. There's so much more that I want to ask you, but I can't do that because we'll be here all day. And thank you so much to everyone listening as well. Take care.
Bye-bye.